had worked in the salvage yards of station for 15 years. Every day was the same. He woke up in his small room, ate cheap food, and went to work on broken ships. He pulled out dead wires. He cut apart rusted metal. He sold whatever he found to dealers who paid him very little. It was not a good life, but it was his life. The orbital salvage yards floated in the darkness of space like a graveyard for ships. Thousands of vessels drifted here, some as old as human memory, others from alien civilizations that had died long ago. The Galactic Consortium controlled this part of space, and they decided what happened to every piece of floating metal. Humans were still new to the galaxy. They had only been among the stars for 300 years, and the other species never let them forget it. Was 42 years old. His hands were rough from work. His eyes were tired from staring at screens and welding flames. He had no family, no real friends, and no future that looked different from his past. But he had one dream that kept him going. He wanted to own his own repair shop, a place where he could be his own boss, a place where no one could tell him what to do. When the consortium put an old cargo ship up for auction, saw his chance. The ship was ugly. Its hull was covered with holes from tiny rocks that had hit it over hundreds of years. The writing on its side had faded so much that no one could read it. The consortium inspectors had marked it as junk. They said it had no working systems, no historical value, and no purpose except to be melted down for scrap. But saw something else. He saw a cargo bay big enough to hold all the machines he needed. He saw a fusion reactor that still had some life in it. He saw walls that could be fixed and floors that could be cleaned. He saw a home. He used every credit he had saved over 15 years. He borrowed money from people who charged too much interest. He sold his small room on station and moved into the ship itself. When the auction ended, the ship was his. The first week was hard work. Started by removing everything that was broken or useless. He pulled out old conduits that had turned green with age. He cut away panels that crumbled at his touch. He mapped every room, every hallway, every corner of the ship. It was bigger than he had thought. They had built walls inside walls, creating a maze of small spaces that made no sense. On the 8th day, was working in a section near the back of the ship. He had found what looked like a storage closet, but the door was stuck. When he finally cut through it with his plasma torch, he found that the closet was not a closet at all. It was a hidden room, sealed away from the rest of the ship. The room was small, maybe 3 meters on each side. The walls were made of a metal that did not recognize. It was darker than anything he had seen before, and it seemed to drink in the light from his torch. In the center of the room, sitting on a pedestal that rose from the floor, was a crystal. The crystal was about the size of his fist. It was blue, but not a simple blue. It seemed to have depth, like looking into an ocean, and it was glowing. Very faintly, very softly, but definitely glowing. After centuries of floating dead in space, something in this ship was still alive. Stood very still. His heart was beating fast. He knew the law. The consortium had rules about finding alien technology. If you found something that still worked, you had to report it immediately. They would send inspectors. They would take the object away. They would give you a small reward and a pat on the head, and you would never see the thing again. But this crystal was not. Had worked on ships for years. He knew their technology, their designs, their materials. This was something else. The room itself was different from the rest of the ship. The walls were smoother, the angles sharper. It was as if someone had built this secret chamber first, and they had simply built their ship around it without ever knowing it was there. Reached out and touched the crystal. It was warm like skin. The glow seemed to respond to his touch, growing slightly brighter for just a moment. He felt something then, something he could not explain. It was like a whisper at the edge of his mind, a voice too quiet to understand. He should have called the consortium. He should have followed the law, but something stopped him. Maybe it was greed. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the feeling that he had finally found something that belonged to him and him alone. Picked up the crystal and put it in his pocket. He walked out of the hidden room and sealed the door behind him. Then he went back to work on his cargo bay, cutting and welding, and pretending that nothing had changed. That night he sat in the darkness of his ship and held the crystal in his hands. It glowed softly, painting his face with blue light. He did not know what it was. He did not know where it came from. He did not know what it could do. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. His life would never be the same. Outside his ship, the salvage yards continued their slow drift through space. Thousands of dead vessels tumbled in the darkness, waiting to be torn apart and forgotten, but was no longer just a salvage worker. He was the owner of a secret, and that secret was older than anything humanity had ever found. He told himself he would report it tomorrow. He would do the right thing. He would follow the law. But tomorrow came and he said nothing, and the day after that and the day after that. The crystal sat in his pocket during the day and glowed in his hands at night. It was waiting for something, did not know what. He would find out soon enough. 3 months passed and became two different people. During the day, he was still a salvage worker. He installed power cables in his cargo bay. He welded metal sheets to the walls. He bought second-hand machines and bolted them to the floor. Anyone who visited would see a man building a simple repair shop in the belly of an old ship. Nothing special, nothing unusual. But at night was someone else. When the lights went down and the salvage yards grew quiet, he sat alone with the crystal. He had built a small device to connect it to his computer, using parts from a dozen different machines. The crystal contained data, he was sure of that now, but the data made no sense. The patterns inside the crystal were not like anything in human databases. Had tried every translation program he could find. He had searched through consortium archives for similar symbols. He had even paid a trader to look at copies of the patterns, pretending they were decorations from an old ship. The trader had shrugged and said they meant nothing to him. Was not a scientist. He was not a language expert. He was a mechanic who fixed broken things for a living, but that turned out to be exactly what he needed. One night, after weeks of failure, he stopped trying to read the patterns as words. Instead, he looked at them the way he looked at a broken engine. He searched for connections. He followed lines from one point to another. He asked himself what each part was supposed to do. And suddenly, it all made sense. The patterns were not language. They were blueprints. They were instructions for building things, compressed into a form so elegant that it looked like art. Each symbol was a component. Each line was a connection. The crystal was not a book to be read. It was a manual for machines that could not even imagine. Once he understood this, the data began to open up like a flower. Spent nights tracing the blueprints, following them deeper and deeper into the crystal's memory. There were designs for engines that bent space itself. There were plans for materials that could repair themselves. There were instructions for computers that could think faster than any brain. And at the center of everything, like a key that unlocked all other doors, was a registry code. A number that identified the ship not as a cargo hauler, but as something else entirely. The ship was a founder vessel. Had heard of the founders, of course. Everyone had. They were the oldest story in the galaxy, told by every species that had ever looked up at the stars. The legend said that billions of years ago, a civilization had spread life across the universe. They had seeded planets with the building blocks of biology. They had guided evolution toward intelligence. They had created the conditions for every thinking being that now existed. And then they had vanished. No one knew why. No one knew where they went. All that remained were the stories passed down through countless generations of countless species. Most people thought the founders were myths. Some thought they were exaggerated memories of an ancient race that had simply died out. A few believed they had ascended to some higher form of existence, leaving the physical universe behind. No one had ever found proof that they were real. Until now. The registry code told everything. The ship was called an archival seed. It was one of thousands that the founders had launched across the galaxy before their disappearance. Each seed contained the complete knowledge of their civilization, everything they had learned in billions of years of existence. Most of the seeds had been destroyed by time, by radiation, by the slow death that claimed all things in the void. But this one had survived. They had found it drifting in space thousands of years ago. They had not understood what it was. They had simply covered it with their own hull plating, attached their own engines, and used it to carry goods from one world to another. For generations, they had flown a treasure beyond imagining, and they had never known. Sat in his cargo bay, surrounded by the cheap machines of his half-built workshop. His hands were shaking. His mind was racing. He held in his pocket the most valuable object in the history of the galaxy. He also understood, with terrible clarity, what this meant for his future. The consortium controlled everything. They decided which species could travel where, which technologies could be used, which secrets could be shared. If they learned about the crystal, they would take it. They would study it in secret. They would use its knowledge to make themselves even more powerful, while the rest of the galaxy stayed weak and dependent. And would disappear. People who found things like this did not live long, happy lives. They had accidents. They vanished. Their names were erased from records, and their discoveries were buried in vaults that no one ever opened. He could not tell anyone. He could not sell the crystal. He could not even ask for help understanding its contents. He was alone with a secret that could change the universe, and that secret was slowly changing him. The crystal seemed to sense his acceptance. That night, for the first time, he felt something more than a whisper at the edge of his mind. He felt a presence, ancient and patient, reaching out to him across the vast gulf of time. The founders had designed their seeds to bond with those who found them. They had wanted their knowledge to spread, to grow, to lift other civilizations toward the stars. The crystal was not just a storage device. It was a teacher, waiting for a student. And it had chosen a tired salvage worker from a young species that the galaxy barely noticed. He was not sure he was worthy. He was not sure he was ready, but he knew that he could not walk away. The lesson had begun. Made a mistake on a cold night in the 4th month. He had been working on the ship's original systems, trying to understand how they connected to the additions. The crystal had been teaching him, feeding information into his mind in dreams and quiet moments. He was learning faster than any human had ever learned before, but he was still human, and humans make errors. When he activated the ship's diagnostic program, he did not realize that he was also activating a beacon. The signal was small, just a tiny pulse of energy that lasted less than a second. It had been dormant for ages beyond counting, waiting for someone to wake the ship's true systems. The pulse traveled outward at speeds that human science could not explain. It crossed the vast distances between stars in moments, and somewhere in the cold depths of space, something was listening. The Galactic Consortium had been searching for founder signals for a very long time. They had machines dedicated to nothing else, scanning the universe for any hint of the ancient civilization. When the pulse arrived at their sensors, alarms went off in a dozen command centers across the galaxy. Within 3 days, a consortium ship arrived at station. The ship was long and gray, built for speed and intimidation. Its name was the Judgment of, and it carried one of the consortium's most dangerous agents. Her name was, and she belonged to the species, a race of reptilian beings with scales like polished metal and minds like calculating machines. Had spent 60 years hunting for founder artifacts. She had found 7 in that time, each one carefully recovered and delivered to consortium vaults. She knew what she was looking for. She knew how to find it. And she knew that the signal had come from somewhere in the salvage yards. Saw the consortium ship arrive and felt ice form in his stomach. He knew why they were here. He knew what they wanted. But he also knew that he could not give up the crystal. It had become part of him now, woven into his thoughts and dreams. The founder technology was not just something he possessed, it was something he was becoming. The ship had been changing too. Every repair made seem to improve itself overnight. The fusion reactor now produced 3 times more power than it should. The hull had grown stronger, its molecules rearranging themselves into patterns that human metallurgy could not explain. The navigation computer could calculate paths through space that should have taken hours in mere seconds. The crystal was upgrading everything it touched, including himself. His mind was sharper now. He could see patterns in data that had been invisible before. He could understand systems at a glance that would have taken weeks to study. His body was healing old injuries, scars and aches fading away as the founder technology slowly repaired the damage of 42 years of hard life. When Agent requested permission to board his ship, knew he could not refuse. That would raise too many questions, so he spent 3 hours hiding everything that mattered. The crystal was no longer a single object. Its data had spread throughout the ship, distributed across 1,000 hidden nodes. The hull plating concealed the changes beneath. To anyone looking, the ship was still just an old cargo hauler being converted into a workshop. Came aboard with 2 guards. Her scales were the color of dark silver, and her eyes were cold and calculating. She moved through the ship slowly, scanning everything with devices that hummed and clicked. "You purchased this vessel 4 months ago," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," replied. "I'm building a repair shop, cheaper than renting space on the station. The consortium has detected unusual energy readings from this area. We are investigating all vessels that might be responsible." Kept his face calm. His heart was pounding, but the founder technology helped him control his fear. "I've been doing a lot of welding, running the reactor at high levels. Maybe that's what your sensors picked up." His eyes narrowed. She walked through the cargo bay, looking at the welding machines and power cables and half-finished workbenches. Her devices continued to scan, searching for something that did not appear to be there. "This ship is," she said, "but something about its core structure does not match standard designs." "It's old," said. "Maybe they built things differently back then." For a long moment, stared at him. Felt like she was looking through his skin, past his bones, into the secret places where the truth lived. But she could not see what was not there. The founder technology had learned to hide itself, to become invisible to the tools that searched for it. "We will be monitoring this sector closely," said at last. "If you notice anything unusual, you will report it immediately." "Of course," said. The agent left with her guards. The Judgment of remained in orbit around station, watching and waiting. But they had found nothing. The crystal's secrets remained hidden. That night sat alone in the darkness of his ship. The founder presence touched his mind, warm and ancient and patient. It showed him things, terrible things, the truth about the consortium and the secrets they had kept for thousands of years. Every major power in the galaxy had founder artifacts. They had found a database of farming technology, using it to make their planet rich beyond measure. They had found medical knowledge that they sold to other species at impossible prices. The consortium itself was built on hoarded founder secrets, each member species using their pieces to gain advantage over others. They did not share. They did not uplift. They took what they found and buried it, using it only for themselves while keeping everyone else in darkness. The founders had wanted something different. They had left their knowledge behind so that all species could grow together. The archival seeds were meant to be shared, to spread, to lift the entire galaxy toward the stars. But the consortium had betrayed that purpose. For thousands of years, they had kept the galaxy divided and weak, fighting over scraps while the real treasure stayed locked away. Understood now why the crystal had chosen him. It was not because he was special. It was because he was ordinary, a human from a young species with no power and no importance, someone who had nothing to gain from hoarding secrets, someone who might actually share. The ship hummed around him, its systems growing stronger by the day. Agents circled overhead, suspicious but unable to prove anything. And former salvage worker began to plan. He could not stay here forever. Eventually, the consortium would find a reason to tear his ship apart. He needed to run. He needed to reach human space where he might find people willing to listen. And then he needed to make a choice that would change the galaxy forever. Ran on a night when the stars seemed darker than usual. The consortium ship was still watching, but it could not see everything. The founder technology had taught how to bend light around his vessel, how to slip through sensor networks like water through fingers. One moment his ship was sitting in the salvage yards. The next moment it was gone, jumping through a fold in space that carried it halfway across the galaxy in the blink of an eye. The journey to human space took 3 days. 3 days of running, of hiding in the shadows between stars, of listening to the angry signals from consortium ships searching for the vessel that had escaped their grasp. They called him a thief, a criminal, a threat to galactic stability. They did not know what he carried, but they knew it was important, and that was enough to make him the most wanted human in the universe. Arrived at New Geneva, the oldest human colony outside of Earth. It was a world of green hills and blue oceans, settled in the early days of human expansion. The Human Confederation kept its main government here, in a city of white towers that rose toward the sky. Getting an audience with the Confederation Council was not easy. Was a salvage worker with no credentials, no reputation, and no reason anyone should listen to him. But he had something better than credentials. He had proof. When he demonstrated what his ship could do, the council stopped asking questions and started paying attention. Admiral was the first to truly understand. She was an old woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, a veteran of 3 wars against species who thought humans were easy targets. She had spent her life defending her people against a galaxy that looked down on them. And now, she was watching a salvage worker create solid objects from thin air, using technology that made human science look like children playing with blocks. "This is real," she said, her voice quiet with wonder. "The founders were real." "They were real," agreed. "And they left this behind for us, for everyone. The consortium has been hiding founder artifacts for thousands of years. Every major species has pieces of the puzzle, but they keep them secret. They use them to stay powerful while everyone else stays weak." "And what do you want to do with it?" the Admiral asked. Had thought about this question for a long time. The founder knowledge flooding his mind was overwhelming. He understood perhaps 1% of what the archive contained, but that 1% was enough to make humanity the most powerful species in the galaxy. He could use it to crush the consortium, to build an empire that would make the old powers look like insects. But that was not what the founders had intended. They had not left their knowledge behind so that one species could dominate all others. They had left it so that everyone could grow together. "I want to share it," said. "I want to send the archive's contents to every corner of the galaxy. I want to give it to the species that the consortium has kept down for thousands of years. I want to do what the founders wanted us to do." The council erupted in argument. Some members thought was insane. Giving away such power would make humanity a target. The consortium would destroy them for breaking the careful balance that had kept the galaxy stable for so long. But others saw a different future. Humanity had always been at the bottom of the galactic order. They had scraped and begged and fought for every scrap of respect. No matter what they achieved, the older species still treated them like children who had stumbled onto the adult stage. If they hoarded the founder knowledge, they would become just another consortium power, sitting on secrets while the rest of the galaxy suffered. But if they shared it, they would become something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral spoke last. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "We have spent 300 years trying to prove that humanity deserves a place among the stars," she said. "We have fought wars. We have made sacrifices. We have done everything we could to earn the respect of species that have never wanted to give it. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every council member. Now we have a choice. We can be like them. We can hoard power and crush anyone who threatens us. We can become the thing we have always fought against. She turned to, or we can be something different. We can show the galaxy what humanity really is, not because we are stronger than them, but because we are better than them. The vote was close. It took 19 hours of debate, argument, and shouting, but in the end the council made its decision. They chose to share. Began transmitting the archive's contents that very night. He sent the blueprints across every open frequency in known space, addressing them to anyone willing to receive. He explained what the founders had intended. He invited every species, large and small, powerful and weak, to take what they needed and build a better future. The response was immediate. A small species that had been treated as servants by for centuries received medical knowledge that cured a plague the consortium had let fester for generations. The confined to a handful of crowded worlds by treaties that favored larger powers, gained access to terraforming technology that opened entire star systems to settlement. The considered too primitive for consortium membership turned out to be mathematical geniuses once they had the computational tools to express their abilities. Across the galaxy, species that had been held down for thousands of years began to rise. The consortium's carefully maintained hierarchy was crumbling, and at the center of the storm, humanity stood not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. The consortium sent warnings. They sent threats. They demanded that humanity stop transmitting and surrender the archive, but it was already too late. The knowledge was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. The galaxy was changing and nothing could stop it now. War was coming. Everyone knew it. The consortium would not let their power disappear without a fight. But humanity was no longer alone. The species they had helped were gathering, forming alliances that had been impossible just months before, and they all remembered who had given them the gift of knowledge. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity was truly capable of. The consortium fleet arrived at the edge of human space on a day that would be remembered for 1,000 years. 200 warships jumped out of folded space, their weapons charged and their shields glowing. They had sent their finest vessels, built with technology that had dominated the galaxy for generations. They had contributed their fastest cruisers. A dozen other consortium species had added their strength to the armada. They came to crush humanity, to take back the archive, and to restore the order that had kept them powerful for so long. Agent commanded the lead vessel, the same gray ship that had circled station 2 years before. She had watched her civilization's dominance crumble with every transmission had sent. She had seen species that had bowed to the for centuries suddenly stand tall, armed with technology that made consortium ships look like toys. She had hunted across the galaxy, and now she had finally found him. But the human fleet that waited at the edge of Sol was not what she expected. There were human ships, yes, but they were not the crude vessels that humanity had built in their short time among the stars. These ships had been transformed, rebuilt according to founder designs that the consortium had never seen. Their hulls gleamed with materials that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Their weapons glowed with energies that made sensors scream warnings. And they were not alone. Beside the human fleet, ships from 40 different species had gathered. They had come, their medical frigates ready to heal the wounded on any side. They had brought their new terraforming vessels, now converted into mobile repair stations. They had arrived in ships that seemed to be made of pure mathematics, their designs so advanced that they hurt the eyes to look at. All of them had answered humanity's call. All of them had come to defend the species that had given them hope. Stood on the bridge of his ship, the same vessel he had bought as a broken cargo hauler just 2 years ago. It had changed beyond recognition. The founder technology had transformed it into something beautiful and terrifying, a craft that moved through space like a thought and struck like lightning. But had not changed as much. He was still a mechanic at heart. He still wore simple clothes and spoke simple words. The founder knowledge filled his mind, but he had not let it make him into something he was not. Once transmission came, he answered it himself. "Surrender the archive," the agent said. Her voice was cold with fury. "This technology was never meant for you. You have stolen what belongs to the consortium." Shook his head. "The founders left their knowledge for everyone. You are the ones who stole it, hiding it away while the rest of the galaxy suffered. We are just returning it to its rightful owners." "You are children," spat. "You have been among the stars for 300 years. You know nothing of the burdens of power. You will destroy yourselves and everyone around you." "Maybe," he said, "but at least we will do it together." The battle began with fire and fury. Consortium weapons lashed out at the Allied fleet, beams of energy that had shattered worlds in centuries past. But the Allied ships did not shatter. Their shields, built according to founder designs, absorbed the attacks and turned them aside. And then the humans struck back. But they did not strike to kill. The founder archive had contained weapons of terrible power, devices that could crack planets and extinguish stars. Had not shared those. Instead, he had focused on something different. Weapons that disabled instead of destroyed. Technologies that unraveled enemy systems without harming the crews inside. Consortium ships found their weapons going dark. Their engines sputtered and died. Their shields collapsed, leaving them helpless but unharmed. One by one, the greatest fleet the galaxy had ever assembled was rendered powerless. It was not a massacre, it was a lesson. Admiral commanded the Allied fleet from her flagship, watching the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. Humanity had proven something today. They had shown that they could defeat the consortium, but more importantly, they had shown that they would not become the thing they had fought against. When the last consortium ship drifted helpless in space, transmitted one final message across all frequencies. "The war is over," he said, "but the work is just beginning. The founders left their knowledge behind so that all species could grow together. They wanted us to lift each other up, not tear each other down. The consortium forgot that. They let fear and greed twist the founders' gift into a weapon." He paused, looking at the disabled ships floating in the void. "We have a choice now. We can continue the cycle. We can hoard power and crush our enemies. We can become the new consortium, ruling through fear instead of partnership. Or we can do something different. We can share what we know. We can help each other grow. We can build a galaxy where every species has a chance to reach the stars." In the days that followed, the consortium sent representatives to negotiate. They had no choice. Their military power was broken, their secrets exposed, their hoarded knowledge spreading across the galaxy faster than they could contain it. The treaty that emerged was something new in galactic history, not a document of conquest but an agreement of cooperation. Technology would be shared openly. Knowledge would flow freely between species. The old hierarchy was dead, replaced by a partnership of equals. It would not be easy. Thousands of years of division could not be healed in a single day. There would be conflicts and setbacks and moments when it seemed the old ways would return. But humanity had planted a seed. The same kind of seed the founders had planted billions of years ago, when they first spread life across the stars. Admiral found in his ship after the treaty was signed. He was sitting in his cargo bay, surrounded by the welding equipment he had never gotten around to removing. The most powerful man in the galaxy, and he still looked like a tired salvage worker. "You could rule everything now," she said. "You understand the archive better than anyone. You could make yourself king of the galaxy." Laughed, running his hand along a welding rig that had grown dusty from disuse. "I am a mechanic, Admiral. I fix broken things." He stood up and looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the founders were watching. They had left the physical universe behind long ago, ascending to a form of existence that even the archive could not describe. But they had left their children behind, all the species they had seeded across the cosmos. And now, for the first time in billions of years, those children were learning to grow together. The galaxy was broken, said quietly. The consortium had twisted it into something the founders never intended. Species fighting each other instead of helping. Knowledge hoarded instead of shared. Everyone so afraid of falling behind that no one could move forward. He turned to the Admiral with a smile. I just found the right tools to fix it. Far away, in a realm beyond space and time, the founders observed the small species that had passed their test. Humanity had been given ultimate power, and they had chosen to share it. They had been given the chance to dominate, and they had chosen to lift others up instead. It was exactly what the founders had hoped for, all those billions of years ago. The uplift had begun, and humanity would lead the way. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were but because they understood something that the older species had forgotten. The only way to truly rise was to help others rise with you.